Before I start the sermon, we're going to have a look at a 5-minute video from the Baptist Missionary Society about their work in working in particular with refugees and people in similar situations.
Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." My name is Sam Chase, and I'm head of program for the Help for the Journey work that BMS undertakes. You know, my whole adult life, I've only had one thing in the right-hand pocket of my trousers. No matter how old I am or where I live, I've only had one thing, and those are my keys. They're keys to my house, they're keys to where I work, they're keys to my car. And forcibly displaced people, whether they're refugees or asylum seekers, are people who arrive with no keys, because all of the doors that are open to them in their life are gone. They've lost home, which is not just a place to live, it's a place where you are known, it's a place where you have identity, it's a place of friendship, it's a place where you go to school or where you have work, and they are displaced to a place that is totally new. So in many ways, what we're trying to do is offer a little bit of home or a lot of home to people who are on the journey, even when they're in transit locations. We believe that the Church of Jesus Christ can be a welcoming community that offers home to people. The journey of someone who is forcibly displaced has 3 phases. There's a source phase, a transit phase, and a destination phase. So source contexts are where people are potentially forcibly displaced, and we want to work to mitigate the possibility of that. We work with various organizations in various parts of the world to increase the well-being of people, so there's less chance of displacement. We also offer training to church leaders so that they can lead churches to flourish in contexts where they are a minority and where they can have strength, resilience, and flourishing. But people do get forcibly displaced, and so then in transit locations, we often offer the basic things that people need. Sometimes it's food, sometimes it's water, it's health, it's laundry, a place to keep clean. But some of those transit locations last a while, so we start to offer education for children. And then in the destination context, what we want to offer is welcome and integration, so people can really settle. And that takes years, but we know that one of the best ways that can happen is by people finding a group of people who are from their own culture, speak their own language, and maybe are also people who are worshipers of Jesus. So in all of those contexts, we are trying to offer a little bit of home, a little bit of safety, and a little bit of welcome to the extent that we can. In Matthew 25, there's a very short but powerful phrase where Jesus says to his people, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me in." And that's the call of the church, that's the call of God's people, to welcome the stranger, to welcome people who are different, to welcome people who are not like us, to welcome people who need a home. And this ties into a long tradition in Christian history of the act of hospitality, of welcoming people around the table, physically, around the table, metaphorically, to be together, to have community, to share a meal together. My parents were not forcibly displaced, but they were displaced people. They came as immigrants to the UK from South India, where I was born. And then when I was 10 months old, we moved to Canada. And for most of my life, I've lived in Canada. The first 14 years of my life, I lived in a small mining town in Northern Ontario. And we were the first Indian family there. And not once in 14 years did I feel like I didn't belong. Not once in 14 years did I feel displaced. And it's all because of a small 50-person Baptist church that we became a part of. They were our family. We had meals there, we had friends there, we got involved. That was our home. That's why I do what I do.
think it's more important I see what I'm reading clearly rather than your faces clearly. So, this is Sanctuary Sunday, which falls at the end of the annual Refugee Week in this country. A year ago, I was preaching on this theme at Trinity URC when we were there for one of our joint services, and we followed material throughout that service suggested by a church group in Scotland. While wanting to acknowledge the same theme today, this service needed to be quite different, and the video we've just seen focusing on the journey is one which reflects the words on our notice board at the front of the church. We invite you to walk with us as we follow Jesus, our guide on life's journey. That, in its simplicity, is just what we're about, inviting people to join us following Jesus. It's hard to put it more clearly. But for people walking by, especially for those who've had little or no contact with the church before in their lives, even crossing the threshold is a major issue. This is why our efforts with the recent extravaganzas which Jill has spearheaded, getting 50 people plus into our hall, most of whom have never come in before, is a major initiative and a critical first step. Obviously, we need to build on that initiative, but without just repeating ourselves. Offering hospitality is one way in which we can make people feel welcome. Refreshments after a service is one way of extending our welcome beyond a handshake at the door. But people have to feel welcome enough even to come to meet with us like that. And it often takes a number of times before someone responds. As most of you know, I worked for Christian Aid, the Relief and Development Agency, for over 25 years and had a number of overseas visits to meet with partner groups in a wide variety of countries. As we know from the Old Testament, a welcome to travellers is important and found in every local community. Hospitality is always offered, so we might often sit down to eat with a family. I've met with refugee groups, both Tamil and Muslim refugees in Sri Lanka, and also groups from Sri Lanka in South India, Oromo people from Ethiopia, in Sudan. In South Africa, there were many migrant workers from other Southern African countries working in the mines when I was there in 1989. But my closest contact with refugees has been in the West Bank and Gaza. The internationally designated Palestinian areas since the formation of Israel from 1948. And there were numerous influxes of refugees from as far back as then, when most refugee camps were set up, and then refilling those or extending them from various eruptions of violence over the years. I've already shared with everyone about the keys as symbols of homes lost, which are still worn around the necks of the very oldest refugees even today. And Sam's story began with keys and ended with a small Canadian Baptist church of about 50 who nurtured the faith of a growing lad to commitment and beyond. We need to be that kind of church for people arriving to live among us here in Wigan. Refugees are likely to flee from their homes for a wide variety of reasons. In time of war, and indeed their homes may literally be the kind of rubble we've seen on our televisions from the Ukraine or Gaza today. Or they've become Christians in a country where this may mean persecution, losing jobs, arrest, imprisonment, and so on, as might be the case in Iran. It may be that it's to do with lost harvests in rural areas when a change of weather may mean they hope to go back, so they either remain in the country as internally displaced people, or they cross a border to the nearest safe area, hoping to return. They may have been helping a colonial power with translation or other tasks, but as they're withdrawing, so it is not safe for these individuals and their families to stay, as we found in Afghanistan, or our withdrawal from Hong Kong. Or it may be a combination of factors which leads to their needing to move. There are also others who try to come not as refugees and asylum seekers, but as economic migrants. And I find it hard to understand why we should query that. As much of our own NHS staff are seeking better conditions now in Australia. This, of course, undermines the skills market of the home nation who've borne the brunt of training the person, and then they go off to find somewhere better, just as West Indian folk came to support us after the war in that rebuilding period. The economics of greed, or some would just call it self-betterment, takes people across the world in a variety of directions all the time, as they try the best way of supporting their families. And some end up on the coast and try a boat. Okay, they've been manipulated on their journey. But whatever the circumstances, we, as a Christian church, should be welcoming any who come and show an interest in our message, inviting them to meet Jesus among us. What a responsibility that is. I wonder what would happen if one of those coming in were to be somebody called Jesus, a refugee from Egypt, himself in disguise. What would he find? How many sheep and how many goats would he have to sort out here? As we draw to the end of our annual cycle of activities, what are we looking ahead to do in the autumn? Just the usual same old activities? Or should we perhaps be looking forwards to something new? Should we be spending these summer months, while we're not too busy doing things, using our time at home to pray more, to lay before God what we really feel about where we are as a fellowship, to ask him whether there's anything else that he's leading us towards or that we should be developing? Or maybe he's waiting to try to get his word in edgeways while we babble on. He's waiting for the one person he's trying to speak to and through. and that could be you. It may be that you're the only person who's been entrusted with the bright idea for a new initiative which will take us forward. You don't have to be the person to carry it out. Just being receptive to share the idea, perhaps something you've read about or seen at a church you visit on holiday, or something from songs of praise. Chat with someone else about it if you aren't sure, and you may find there's someone to support the idea before you share it with a wider group. Can we perhaps also make sure we're really spending time getting to know our newer members? And I think we're aware that some have been missing for a couple of weeks now. And even some of the older ones we need to get to know better than we already do. Pastor Samuel Adebanjo from Nigeria, who's been worshipping with us along with his family for a few months now, will be leading our worship one Sunday in July. And that will add a new dimension to our worship, which will be a great encouragement. So can I ask us all to read this passage in Matthew 25 once again when we get home, to consider the ways in which we can each ensure we're behaving like sheep rather than goats, however cute they look on the television. Let's hope none of us have to seek sanctuary from extreme heat or rising water levels over the summer period, even if the year so far has been a most irregular one weather-wise. May God keep us alert to his prompting. Amen. So now we join in our final hymn,